Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, for now, Taylor Estes. Taylor, I am in Destin, Florida. You would not know it. I'm not on the beach for this podcast recording. I'm in my hotel room, but just outside. It is beautiful white sandy beaches. The SEC knows how to have spring meetings. I'll tell you that at the Hilton Sandestin Beach Resort. It is something. We had a reception the first night here, and it was a who's who of college football. And so even though Texas is here, President Jay Hartzell, athletic director Chris Del Conte, Oklahoma athletic director Joe Castiglione, and OU president Joe Harris. They don't have a vote, but they have been in all the meetings, and they're taking it all in because next summer they will be voting members of the SEC. It's coming. So buckle up, kids.
Yeah, I mean, Chip, I'm kind of disappointed you don't have a better background than your hotel room, but Chip's out working hard.
I got palm trees right outside. I'd open up the window, but I think it'd mess up my lighting.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, you're not there for vacation. I'm coming off vacation. That's why we did not have an episode of the Flagship Podcast last week. Unlike Chip, I actually got to enjoy the beach and the sunny weather, but it was in Cancun. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get to, Chip, with the SEC meetings and where you're there. So let's start with what you think is the hot topic. I think that's probably the upcoming vote for the conference schedule, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long tap dance by the SEC about whether to play 8 conference games or 9 conference games. And I wrote a week ago in the Insider that don't be surprised if it's an 8-game conference schedule temporarily, meaning in 24 and 25, and then it graduates to a 9-game conference schedule in 26. There are a multitude of reasons. I was told ESPN's financial situation with the Walt Disney Company laying off 7,000 people and trying to cut $5.5 billion in costs is a significant factor. Also, you've got the haves and the have-nots in the SEC. The haves don't really seem to care because they are confident that they can handle it. The have-nots, the schools that have finished in the lower half of the SEC, are worried about taking on another loss. And obviously, that they're going to, if you add a 9th conference game, you're going to add 8 conference losses in the SEC. So to me, it's kind of a lot to do about nothing. They need to get to 9 games, and it sounds like they're going to, but it's just not happening as readily as maybe some thought, because this has been going on for a year. So some of the folks listening to this, the news will have come out because there will be a vote later this week. Or not, or they'll just leave it the way it is. I mean, I'm learning in the SEC, anything kind of goes, but the SEC is this all powerful, the biggest, brightest, shiniest, strongest, most dangerous, 13 national champions in the last 17 years in football. And yet, the politics of the SEC can be a little cumbersome. So it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You come to these meetings and you hear about the all powerful Oz, and then you pull back the curtain and there's kind of, like people running around trying to figure it all out. So, listen, I'm excited. I'm learning, but this has taken way too long, and they need to get to 9 games, and I'll tell you why, Taylor. I mean, from a Texas and OU perspective, it really hurts them to go to 8 because they have their neutral site rivalry game, and if you go to 8 games, it means that Texas is going to have 3 conference home games in a given year, and then 4 conference home games in a given year. And because that neutral site game counts as a home game in odd number years for Texas and even numbered years for OU. And that, that means that they better have some really good SEC opponents in the year that they only have 3 conference opponents. And, with Texas having played a 9-game conference schedule in the Big 12, they've been able to ensure 4 conference home games and a balanced schedule for the season ticket holders since for the last 11 years. So Texas would have to go out and hurry and schedule teams. They're not going to, Chris Del Conte said they're not going to schedule 1 AA teams. So they'll have to find, those UTSAs and Texas States, UTEPs in there to fill out the schedule. And so, it's going to be good when we finally get the SEC teams coming into Austin, Texas. We know how excited everyone got last year for Alabama. So the question is, who's Texas going to get? Because if they go with that 8-game conference schedule format, it'll be 1 annual opponent. That'll be OU. And then 7 rotating opponents. And when they finally go to 9, it sounds like it would be the 3-6 model where you get 3 annual opponents and 6 rotating opponents. And Texas's 3 annual opponents would be OU, A&M, and Arkansas. And that, I don't care what Texas fans say about whether they care about playing A&M again or Arkansas again, they're going to get tickets to those games and they're going to watch and make an appointment, and it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have not read the Insider that we released Thursday morning, definitely check it out. But a little blurb of it, Chip. Texas A&M athletic director Ross Bjork seems to be pretty confident that when Texas and Texas A&M do meet again, that it will be the first meeting at Kyle Field in College Station. Sounds like there might be differing opinions based off what Chris Del Conte told you. What's the latest with that?
Well, I'm convinced that Greg Sankey probably told A&M Chancellor John Sharp as an olive branch, because A&M did not want Texas in the SEC, and the SEC met without A&M in the room to get Texas and OU into the conference, and A&M was blindsided by the whole thing. And I'm sure it was an olive branch from Sankey to Chancellor John Sharp that, hey, don't you worry, when that first meeting happens, it'll be in College Station. Chris Del Conte hasn't heard anything about it. So he's like, this is news to me. And Greg Sankey was asked about it, and he said, I haven't released the schedule. You'll know when we release the schedule. So kind of that Wizard of Oz type of stuff. But I don't doubt that A&M's been told that they're going to host the first meeting of the 100-year rivalry when it resumes after it ended in College Station in 2011 with Justin Tucker kicking a 40-yard field goal to break A&M hearts. But it's kind of the worst kept secret going on here at SEC meetings, and so A&M saying all the right things. Jimbo Fisher was asked, who would you want your annual opponent to be in an 8-game conference schedule, and he said Texas, fully knowing that Texas is going to keep OU as its annual opponent because of the Red River Shootout. So Jimbo looks like the guy taking the high road there. Said he'd like Texas over LSU, when all we've heard from A&M the last decade is how much they love playing LSU and don't miss playing Texas on Thanksgiving. But that's what rivalries are all about. That's what the passion's all about. I can't wait for that game to resume. It's just one of those, absolutely mark your calendar for the year and wait every year until those two teams meet, so that the water cooler talk between Texas fans and A&M fans and who owns who has scoreboard, that those conversations go on all year. That's how much that football game means.
Yeah, I'm just excited for that game to come back, regardless of where the first meeting is. And also, I think Jimbo Fisher kind of understands what it's like to be in a situation where, I mean, I know that Texas and Texas A&M are going to be in the same conference, but when he was at Florida State, even though they weren't in the same conference, they still played Florida. They still kept those rivalries going. So it wouldn't be surprising if he's been kind of championed for that rivalry in general, whether it was in the SEC or non-conference. But I think that Steve Sarkisian's made his remarks pretty clear about wanting that game to resume, and it's good for college football. Like let's be real about it. I know there are differing opinions on both sides, and as you said, they may sit here and say that Texas fans may say they don't want to play Texas A&M and vice versa. But at the end of the day, they spend the whole offseason talking about each other. It's like, yes, you do. Like deep down, yes, you do. Like think back to when you had those, whether you're an A&M fan or a Texas fan, you had those gotcha, and talk trash for a whole year after whoever wins a game. I mean, that's what makes college football so special, I think, and so unique, not like the pros. You don't get that type of passion. And I mean, the sooner that game comes back, I think the better for college football, and who cares where it is. I just want it to be home and home. Like no more. Texas has their neutral site. It's a very unique, setup. And I've actually been asked a lot this week from other people, like, why did Texas and OU really want to be at the state fair? And it's like, well, if you've never been to the game, you're the ones asking those questions because it's such a unique environment there. But, Texas doesn't have a rivalry game at home, and bringing A&M back is the perfect rivalry game, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I was able to break the news here at SEC meetings after talking to Oklahoma Athletic Director Joe Castiglione that Texas and OU will renew their contract with the State Fair of Texas, which expires in 25. But they'll start talking early about extending that contract, and Castiglione would not go into detail because he hasn't talked. He and Del Conte haven't talked to the State Fair directly, but they are always seeking to improve the quote unquote fan amenities at the Cotton Bowl. For those who've been to that game, they know the bathrooms are a little dicey at the aging Cotton Bowl, but and they've added concession stands over the years. In 2008, they added 30,000 seats by filling in the upper deck of the Cotton Bowl. So it's a classic. It's not great,
No,
but
it's not.
the scene overcomes the lack of stadium amenities there at the Cotton Bowl, and it's all about dividing the seating at the 50-yard line. It's like none other, and so that makes me happy that they're going to keep that game in the State Fair of Texas.
Yeah.
And Taylor, I gotta say, there's been a lot of talk this week at SEC meetings about Steve Sarkisian hiring former Wisconsin head coach Paul Chryst as a special assistant on offense. Now, Paul Chryst, for those who follow college football, they know that Paul Chryst is a diehard run the football guy, a pound it between the tackles guy, loves big hulking offensive linemen, loves jumbo sets, and loves to run the football. He had Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin, who ran for almost 2,000 yards in 3 straight seasons. He ran for 1,977 yards as a freshman and over 2,000 yards as a sophomore and junior before going to the NFL. And Paul Chryst won 72% of his games in 8 years at Wisconsin before getting fired mid-season last year. And it was perplexing to just about everyone. But it was a new athletic director at Wisconsin who clearly wanted his own guy. But, Steve Sarkisian bringing in Paul Chryst is fascinating because we've been talking on the Flagship Podcast kind of all off season since the Alamo Bowl and since the NFL draft with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson moving on. How is Texas going to run the football? And is Steve Sarkisian going to stick with the run, be patient with the run after giving up on the run too early, in my opinion, in games last year against Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU, and was rewarded when he went to the run in the fourth quarter against Kansas State and Baylor and Kansas, the whole game against Kansas. So I think this is fascinating. And I give Steve Sarkisian a ton of credit for bringing in a really strong-minded, running-minded, offensive mind like Paul Chryst. And so how about the special assistants that Steve Sarkisian's added just in the last month? Paul Chryst from Wisconsin, Joe DeCamillis, one of the top special teams coaches in the NFL for the last 30 years, won a Super Bowl. He's won 2 Super Bowls, but won a Super Bowl with the Rams 2 years ago, and was a featured speaker at the UT Coaches Clinic 2 seasons ago. And then Payet Sadat, who comes in from Portland State, kind of an unconventional defense guy, ran the double eagle flex at Army from 2009 to 2013. That double eagle flex is kind of based in Dick Tomey's Desert Swarm defense from the early 90s. So this is, kudos to Steve Sarkisian. We were wondering what's going on with these special assistants. Well, he waited and got some big time dudes. So another reason to be excited about Texas football going into this 2023 season.
Yeah, and that's it's funny because I think there's been a lot of questions among Texas fans too about why is it that they haven't filled these roles. I mean, these roles have been open since January, and Steve Sarkisian took his time in hiring them. But I would say from an outside perspective, if you're a Texas fan, you're probably wondering, well, is he offering these jobs and people aren't taking? It's easy to kind of go down those little like rabbit holes of like what ifs. And the fact that he was able to get Paul Chryst, I think, is huge. I mean, losing Gary Patterson was a big deal last year for the defensive special assistant. And I know there are some people that may give Gary Patterson all the credit for the improvement you did see on defense. I would think Gary Patterson would be the first one to say, no, it wasn't just me. But having that veteran set of eyeballs as a former head coach that was a defensive minded head coach definitely helped out the defense. And if you're a Texas fan, I think that's what you're hoping happens for the offense. I mean, Steve Sarkisian, there's no denying he is a fantastic offensive mind, one of the best in the sport, I would say. But there were times in games, as a play caller, as a head coach, where sometimes you were wondering, is he listening to anybody? Who is he relying on to help him out? Because there's so many different moving parts that a head coach has to pay attention to, aside from just calling the offense. I mean, he's not allowed to go huddle up or he doesn't have the time really to go huddle up with the offense when the defense is on the field, because he's got to watch the defense. He's got to see what's going on there too. And so I think, it's going to be very interesting to see how Steve Sarkisian accepts the other voices, I think, in the room, if he does, because I think it's pretty clear in some of the losses, last season, you're wondering if he's just on an island in his head, in his own mind. Is he listening to what anybody is saying in the headset? Because there were some questionable play calls. There were some times where, there were just instances where the details, I think, later as the games wore on, were kind of overlooked by the head coach as the offensive play caller. And I think if you're a Texas fan, you're hoping that Paul Chryst will be able to make the type of impact that Gary Patterson did to the defense, just on the opposite side of the ball now.
Yeah. I mean, I think Paul Chryst is a guy who, because of his success, I think is a guy who Steve Sarkisian will listen to. I keep going back to this. I keep going back to Sonny Dykes last year, talking about how Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator at TCU, TCU fell behind in a lot of games last year, including games they won against Oklahoma State, Kansas State during the regular season. And Sonny Dykes said, don't you think we need to throw the ball here? And Garrett Riley said, no, we're good, and stayed patient with the running game, against Texas when Texas was doing a great job defensively. And then they finally broke one long run by Kendre Miller, and it helped, kind of give TCU separation in that game. And there are times where you gotta stick with the run, even when it's not not working for you, because eventually you're probably going to break one, especially when you have guys like Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson. And so I thought Texas got away from the run in that TCU game last year, and certainly first and goal from the 2, first and goal from the 5, and no touches for Bijan Robinson against TCU in the second half was frustrating. And so can Paul Chryst be that sounding board for Steve Sarkisian in game? I think is going to be really interesting. So,
because he can't have a microphone, right? He can have
right.
a headset, but you can't have a microphone. But he can be on the field like Gary Patterson was on the field.
Right. And he doesn't even need to, he doesn't even need to have a headset. He can just walk over to Sark and tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, stick with it here. Stick with the running game here. Or let's try this run. Or I'm seeing their defense looks like it's weak over here. And he'll help with all that in helping to develop a running game plan by studying the opponents like Gary Patterson did. And he'll have those ideas going into the game. But the key is, like you said, a guy who Steve Sarkisian trusts, who he'll listen to in game. Because look, Steve Sarkisian's offense in the first half has been outstanding pretty much since he got here. It's the second half where Texas has had leads, lost those leads, kind of developed a reputation for giving away second half leads. The 5-7 season, and until they beat K-State last year. And remember, they were up 31-10 against K-State at halftime, got outscored 17-3 in the second half. They won that game because Bijan Robinson ran it 30 times for 209 yards, and because the defense forced a fumble late as K-State was driving for a potentially tying touchdown. So I think this is going to be fascinating. And I give Steve Sarkisian a lot of credit for bringing in Paul Chryst. It shows that Steve Sarkisian doesn't, he wants other voices. He doesn't think he has all the answers. It's what Nick Saban's been doing at Alabama in terms of bringing in former head coaches who want to learn about Alabama's culture as well. I'm sure Paul Chryst wants to learn about Steve Sarkisian and how he game plans the passing game and complements the running game. Just like Gary Patterson wanted to come and see how Texas was recruiting and how they ran practice. These coaches take these analyst jobs so that they can learn and grow too for their next opportunity. So, Joe DeCamillis, here's a guy 30 years in the NFL, has worked nonstop for 30 years, keeps getting hired by teams. And like I said, won 2 Super Bowls. He has so much respect for Jeff Banks that he wants to come and see how Banks does it. And Banks gets a chance to see how one of the best in the NFL does it. And even if it's only for a year, who knows? It's a great learning experience for all involved. So, and they're usually getting paid by another team.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, they stay relevant with the ability to still be able to collect a lot of times their full buyout. If it's, I imagine Paul Chryst had to buy it. I don't know the details. Again, I was in Cancun, so I may have had a little bit too many pina coladas or something. But but yeah, I mean, it's a way to stay relevant. It's a way to learn, as you said. And I think if you're a Texas fan, Chip, I think you look at this and this is more than just Texas adding special assistants to add special assistants. This is, I think, a very positive sign for the fact that these coaches want to be at Texas. Look at what Nick Saban has done with his special assistants or analysts or, QCs, whatever they are at Alabama. And then look at where they've gone on to be. Steve Sarkisian was one of the people who was in that position on Nick Saban's staff, was given the opportunity to be the offense coordinator. Now he's the head coach at Texas. I mean, I'm not trying to say that Texas is anywhere close to being in a Saban type of factory like what he has built and kind of being the landing spot for former head coaches to, stay relevant before they get their next opportunity. But I think that the fact that Gary Patterson, longtime head coach, definitely going to be, I think, in the College Football Hall of Fame. I mean, the guy walked to work at TCU past a statue of himself because of what he did to that program. Paul Chris, as you said, 72% winning percentage. The fact that those type of coaches are wanting to come to Texas under Steve Sarkisian staff, who is a little bit still an unproven head coach, I think that speaks volumes for the respect that these coaches have, not just for the University of Texas, but for Steve Sarkisian. And that's a good sign because it's worked well, extremely well for Nick Saban at Alabama. Again, I'm not trying to say it's exactly, toe to toe or anything close to what Nick Saban's done at Alabama. But if this continues, that's what it's going to turn into. And it just shows the level of respect that these really well-known coaches, very successful coaches in their career have for Steve Sarkisian. And I think you have to take that as a win if you're a Texas fan and hope that continues, because it shows the program's headed in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think Steve Sarkisian had a chance to have a firsthand look at how Nick Saban incorporated as one source told me this week here, his fired coaches association there at Alabama. And kudos to Steve Sarkisian for trying to replicate what Nick Saban has done. Now, as you said, Steve Sarkisian needs to break through and win and get into a conference championship game and win it. And he'll be cemented as a conference championship coach. I mean, Wisconsin won 3 conference championships. Gary Patterson won 6 in his time at TCU. Steve Sarkisian has yet to win a conference championship as a head coach. Obviously, he was at Washington and USC, and now he's in his 3rd year at Texas. And as I've repeatedly said, the championship coaches usually reveal themselves within the first 3 years, and here we are. So I do think this is a reason to be excited if you're a Longhorn fan, because Steve Sarkisian is bringing in really intelligent, successful voices into the football complex. So it's going to be fun. Taylor, some big news also for basketball. Last night, news coming down that Dylan Mitchell, the talented freshman who was in the NBA draft process, is going to withdraw his name from the draft and return to Texas. This is a little bit of an upset because Dylan Mitchell actually had probably a better than most people think NBA combine. He hit 16 of 25 threes when he was shooting from the 5 different racks around the arc. And this is a guy who didn't attempt a single 3-pointer last season at Texas. And I'll give credit to Rodney Terry. I wrote about this a bit in the Insider this week, that they did a good job of staying connected to Dylan Mitchell and letting them know how they thought that Dylan Mitchell could be used differently as a sophomore than he was used as a freshman. And Dylan Mitchell is trusting Rodney Terry and this coaching staff to be the ones to help him develop into what I'm sure he hopes is a first-round NBA draft pick, because he was getting interest as a second-round draft pick. And I was told if he had a guarantee from a team to be a second-round pick, he'd probably stay in the draft. So this is a good win in re-recruiting or recruiting his own player for Rodney Terry, especially after some tough news this week that Caleb Love, the North Carolina guard, had committed to Arizona. I wasn't crazy about the Caleb Love recruitment. I was a little more interested in the Cam Spencer recruitment. Cam Spencer, 6'4" guard from Rutgers who could really shoot it. He's not as athletic as Caleb Love, and I know Rodney Terry liked the athleticism and the ability to get up and down the floor and really get after people defensively. And Caleb Love commits to Arizona. Cam Spencer announces he's going to visit 4 schools, none of them named Texas. So getting Dylan Mitchell, back is significant. And if you look at the starting 5 for Rodney Terry, it's good. Tyrese Hunter, Max Asmus, the transfer from Oral Roberts, led the nation in scoring as a sophomore. Kendall Weaver from UT Arlington, a really big upside guy with long 6'3", but a 6'7" wingspan, will defend, will do anything. And then you bring in Caden Shedrick from Virginia, 6'11" guy who wants to do a little bit more offensively than what he was allowed to do at UVA. You get Dylan DeZoo back, and they bring in a transfer from UTEP who's a good hustle guy, garbage man. This is they need to add another guard or two, but this is that was a good piece of news for Rodney Terry and the Texas basketball team.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Especially coming off, Max Asmus transfer news coming to Texas. He was one of the top prospects in the transfer portal because he led the nation in scoring, right, last season.
As a sophomore. So the last 3 seasons he averaged 23 points per game. He's a graduate transfer. He'll have 1 year at Texas, but I mean, this is a guy who can absolutely light it up. Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith nicknamed him Midcourt Max because he'll pull up from the logo. He's fearless when it comes to shooting the basketball, and he's a 40% shooter from 3. So even though he's shooting from 27, 29 feet, he's making them. So that's going to be a fun team to watch coming into this next season, Rodney Terry's first season as the head coach. And by the way, down here at SEC meetings, of course, I saw Chris Beard, who's now the head coach at Ole Miss. And when I went up to him and said, hey, anything you want to say reflecting back on how things ended at Texas, he said, no, sir. All good. Moving forward. God is good. And it lost some weight. And so Chris Beard is going to be going head to head with Rodney Terry here in a year or so once they're both in the SEC. And of course, Rick Barnes is still at Tennessee. So that will be interesting on the basketball side of things. And Taylor, Texas baseball. Oh boy. I mean, here we go. Texas baseball, the bullpen has been an issue all year, and now it's even more of an issue because 3 of their top relievers will not be available for regional play when Texas takes on Louisiana on Friday. You've got Heston Toll, the Arkansas transfer, who's now out injured. He's the righty. David Shaw, their best lefty reliever, is also injured and not available. And so, just if Texas wasn't getting, bad news, they wouldn't be getting any news at all. So Texas starting pitching is going to have to carry this team and the hitting. And that's what we saw from them against West Virginia. And they're going to have to find a way to do it again because Louisiana is kind of the opposite. Their bullpen is amazing and their starting pitching isn't great. So Texas needs to jump on the starting pitching Friday and hope that Louisiana, hope that they get a big enough lead on Louisiana that they don't bring in their ace reliever, Cooper Rawls, because that guy is a monster and you don't want to see him coming out of the bullpen. And he's a long reliever. He'll go 5 innings. Let's just put it that way. If Cooper Rawls is in the game and Louisiana is tied or in the lead, it's probably going to be a tough go for Texas. And that's just their first round game of the regional. If they win, they probably face the Miami Hurricanes, the host of that regional. So tough news, but who knows? David Pierce, this team's been resilient. Few people thought that they'd be able to sweep West Virginia and get a share of the Big 12 title. They did. And so now they need to pull off another little piece of magic.
Yeah. Get hot when you need to.
All right. Listen, for those of you who are members of horns247.com, we had some news today, including our co-host here, Taylor Estes. Taylor is going to be, she's accepted a big promotion in the 24/7 Sports Network. You're going to be what they call a tier leader, where you're actually overseeing multiple sites, not just Horns, not just being the managing editor of one site. You're going to be overseeing the operations of multiple sites. This is a great promotion for you, a well-deserved promotion. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Mike Roach, our recruiting coordinator, if you will, recruiting director at Horns 24/7, is also taking a more expanded role, covering recruiting sort of, well, regionally in the state of Texas and even neighboring states for 24/7 sports. He'll still be involved, posting. I mean, he's going to be reporting on kids that are going to have some connection to the Longhorns at different points. But we are bringing in some new young stars, if you will, rising stars, and including Eric Henry, who's going to be joining our team coverage. He's been, covering Conference USA for SB Nation, and is, a really talented hustler, reporter. And Hank South, who's been covering Alabama recruiting for 24/7 Sports, who actually is from Texas and lives in Austin.
Yeah, Texas grad too.
A Texas grad is going to be joining us here at Horns 24/7 to team up with Hudson Standish, and also Jordan Scruggs, a young gun who's just loves covering recruiting, for about Texas, and so that's exciting to, if you're going to lose people like Taylor and you're going to lose people like Mike Roach, that you bring in some young, hungry talent to help myself, Jeff Howe, Hudson Standish, and Tommy Yarish keep feeding the beast, keep feeding the insiders here at Horns 24/7. So, Taylor, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the hard work, and thanks for, everything you've done here at Horns 24/7.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I'm really excited. Like, it's a little bittersweet, because we've built this. If people knew behind the scenes how much work we've all put into building Horns 24/7 into one of the top, team sites in the 24/7 Sports Network, you would probably be like, whoa, I didn't realize all that went into it. So I'm really proud of what we did. And I was wondering if I may have to relocate to Nashville. I don't have to, so I still will be around these parts in Austin. But, I think that the Horns 24/7 staff is adding some really talented, up and covers. Obviously, Hank South, I know he's been covering Alabama recruiting, but he's been doing so from Austin. He's lived in Austin the whole time that he's been covering Alabama recruiting. So he has tons of ties in the state of Texas already. Obviously, Alabama has done a really good job of recruiting in the state of Texas, whether Texas fans like it or not, but he has those ties. And, having Mike Roach also still be in the state, his work is, I don't even have to prove it. It speaks for itself, so he'll still be around too. And I may pop in every now and again. We're not exactly sure with the Flagship Podcast. We might continue doing it together, just since someone's got to keep Chip on his toes, and it's not the easiest job sometimes. No, I'm kidding, Chip. But no, I'm super excited. I mean, this has been, I would say, something that I probably would not have expected the type of promotion to, come down or be offered to me until I was probably in my 40s or later on in my career. So the fact that it was presented at this point in my career, I was like, well, I'd be kind of an idiot to turn this one down, So, and I'm super excited, very pumped, and feel grateful that people believed in me, honestly, to present this opportunity to me. But I wouldn't be in this position without you, Chip, and without our Horns 24/7 staff and all of the work we've done. And I'm excited to see, what this fresh new blood brings to the Horns 24/7 team. And I know it's going to be in great hands and continue to thrive. But and I'll still pop in, don't worry. So I just want, the good thing is for all those I've had to like, ban over the years because you lose your mind a little bit after a loss, like I won't be the one having to do it. Like I'll be like, sorry, like I might be chiming in on those game threads. Who knows? I don't know. But no, I'm super excited for what the future holds.
Well, that's funny, actually. Hey, but we're not done yet. Let's
I'm gonna
get.
start trolling you. I'm gonna start trolling you on the message.
Oh, good. That's what I need. All right, let's get to some love it or leave it.
All right. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a very quick break, but stay tuned. We have plenty more Texas football talk and intel from the SEC meetings coming up. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will continue on here. All right, Chip, my first love it or leave it. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Love it or leave it. Hiring former Wisconsin coach Paul Chryst as a special assistant on offense gives you renewed confidence in Steve Sarkisian as a head coach.
Renewed confidence. Yeah, I'll love this. Normally you'd like to see how it plays out a little bit, but on paper, I just like the fact that Steve Sarkisian's bringing in a guy who is a proven winner. Again, won 72% of his games at Wisconsin in an 8-year run there at Wisconsin, is, a real diehard running the football offensive mind. And with Texas losing Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, my biggest question has been how is Texas going to run the football in 2023? I like Jonathan Brooks, but is Steve Sarkisian going to stay patient with the run? Even with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson last year, he was a little too impatient with the run for me at times in the TCU, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech games. So, ideally you hope Paul Chryst is that guy that Steve Sarkisian can lean on in game, trust what he's hearing back from Paul Chryst and maybe help fill in a blank where Steve Sarkisian needs a little nudge here and there. So I'll say that I love this and kind of just give Sarkisian, benefit of the doubt and credit for bringing in a really talented, successful coach like Paul Chryst. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I guess, renewed confident. Like I've been confident in Steve Sarkisian as a head coach. There's still things that he's got to prove, but I do like what he's done at Texas. I like the culture he's brought to Texas. I like the way they've been recruiting since he arrived here, and I like his kind of very open, no coach speak BS type of approach with things. I mean, it's hard to do that, I think, in today's college football, especially with like the transfer portal, with NIL, all of that type of stuff. He's done a really good job of keeping the guys on campus that they want to keep on campus. And, so I haven't lost confidence in him at all, but I do think that this is a really big positive. I think that this, it's kind of a TBD, right? Because we have to see how much he will rely on some of the assistant coaches that he has brought in. But a guy like Paul Chryst, his resume speaks for itself. And I do think that this probably was a product of Sark, reflecting back on how he needs to improve as a head coach. And so, yeah, I think that this is a good thing. So I'm going to love this and say, like, it gives me more confidence, I think, in Steve Sarkisian as a head coach, and recognizing that there might be some areas where he needs help. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a failure in any way, shape, or form. I mean, that some of the most successful people rely on others to get to where they are and continue to rely on them who they trust. And so, if this is a guy that Sark trusts, a guy that can help him, maybe not abandon the run too early, then it's a good thing. So yeah, I'm gonna love this one too.
All right, love it or leave it, number 2.
All right, second one, love it or leave it. Oklahoma Athletic Director Joe Castiglione telling you Texas and OU will renew their contract with the State Fair of Texas is the best news you've heard at SEC meetings.
It's the best news I've heard so far. So, I mean, with all the tap dancing about the 8 versus 9 conference game schedule, it's like, just make a decision, will you? Listen, I love this because anyone who follows me knows how much I love this game, how much I think this is the best game day atmosphere in sports, and how anyone, I don't care if you're a fan of Southern Cal or the Miami Hurricanes, you need to go to this game. This is one of those bucket list sporting experiences that you need to live through, especially if you're just a college football fan, because of these passionate fan bases sitting on opposite sides of the stadium, yelling at each other. If you are lucky enough to sit near the 50-yard line where you're literally right across the aisle from the other fan base, it's unbelievable, the atmosphere. So, yes, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to love it. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to love it so far. Right now, if the SEC comes out and says they're going to do a 9-game conference schedule starting, immediately, then I would say that might trump it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this game, if as Chip said, if you haven't gone to this game, whether you like Texas, whether you like Oklahoma, whether you hate both teams or anything, you should go. I mean, to put it into perspective, my husband's an Aggie. Like, doesn't he'll root for Texas. I think a lot of it had to do with um, watching me have to work long hours after losses and dealing with angry fans. So maybe that played into it, but obviously has no allegiance to the University of Texas, never been a fan of Oklahoma. He went to one of those games. I've basically forced him while we were dating, and he left saying, okay, yes, you're right. That is one of the coolest games I've ever seen in my entire life. And he's an Aggie, and he said that. And so that is how big this game is. And I know that the facilities, the stadium itself may not be great. I'll tell you, the press box is not great. It's the AT&T Cotton Bowl. Yet sometimes we're like, why don't we have internet? This is weird. Like, I had no phone signal. The Wi-Fi doesn't work. Even hardwiring in is not working, type of thing. But still, there's nothing like it. So as long as this game stays at the State Fair of Texas, I will be definitely a happy person, Chip. So I'm going to love that too.
All right. Love it or leave it, number 3.
All right, final one. Love it or leave it. As regional play is set to begin, Texas baseball appears to have used up all its mojo in sweeping West Virginia to gain a share of the Big 12 regular season title.
Yeah, I mean, it sure seemed like that at the Big 12 tournament, but I'm going to leave this because my man Dylan Campbell has a 35-game hitting streak. Texas has 6 guys, batting over 300. They fielded a 980 clip. And this team has dug deep and come through kind of when you least expected at times. I think we sure expected a lot more out of Texas at the Big 12 tournament, but it didn't happen. Still, though, this Texas team, after what they did against West Virginia, the top of that lineup can get after you. And Louisiana kind of sets up, because their starting pitching isn't great, it kind of sets up for Texas. Like, I kind of expect those bats to come alive again and Texas to have good starting pitching. And even though they've got major questions now in their bullpen with injuries, DJ Burke is in the transfer portal. He's a young guy in the bullpen who's given them some good innings. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna give those bats the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna leave this, Taylor. It might be foolish, but we've seen it from this team. So I'm gonna leave this and say they might have a little more mojo left for the regional. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to leave it too. And I will say this with the Big 12 tournament, obviously you don't want to ever lose games per se, but like TCU played 4 games in 4 days. Like, do you want to do that right before a regional? No, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that, yeah, it didn't look good, but I don't think it's a bad thing that Texas didn't go deep into the Big 12 tournament, because I feel like it's just added wear and tear on your body before the real games truly begin. So I'm going to leave it. I don't think that who knows? They may prove us wrong, and we may look like homers in saying that they have some mojo left. But I think they've had some time to rest. Not having to play all 4 days of the Big 12 tournament. So yeah, I'm going to say there's some mojo left, and I'm going to leave that one too.
All right, folks. There you have it. There's this week's edition of the Flagship Podcast. Again, big congrats to Taylor Estes, and we'll be back. We'll keep it going here on the Flagship Pod. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you're subscribed to Horns 24/7, the YouTube channel, and make sure you're an annual member at horns247.com so you get VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 sports network.
And we have a 60% off special currently going for new members. So definitely get on that. You get for 60% off, get the whole football season, basketball season, leading up to baseball season of 2024 even too. So you definitely want to jump in on that.
Perfect timing, right? Is Texas maybe, and well, they probably are entering the most important football season they've had in the last 30 years, trying to keep the momentum going and break through for their first conference title since 2009 as they prepare to head off to the SEC. I'm going to jump back into these SEC meetings real quick, but until next time, everybody, thanks for listening. Stay safe and keep the faith.